Hello, everybody. Happy
Hello.
Tuesday. Man, I can't believe it's Tuesday. It's like on one hand, I'm happy to get through Monday, and yet Tuesday feels early, and yet I know before we realize it, we are going to
Some
be
more to
off to the
come.
races, and Friday
Mm-hmm.
is well on its way. But in the meantime, wanted to say welcome to everybody here. Thank you for joining. We'd love to know who's here. So please, if you're here and you're present, please drop your name and location in the comments. And also, what got you interested in today's topic? What are you curious about? Okay, and yeah, we'll let me go ahead and set the stage a little more fully as we let people come in, introduce themselves in the chat. We want to give you some rules of engagement. Share in the comments any questions that you may have or what resonated with you, and we'll be sure to piggyback our discussion off anything you share. Two main agreements. The first is to stay curious. There is no right or wrong perspective. What we say is one way to see things. If you have a different take, we welcome you to share it in the comments. And the second is to stay open. This is part of the larger journey. We're not here to give advice or answers to solve problems today, but wanted to share and invite everyone into this collective wisdom that we're trying to build up for ourselves and for each other. So, with these agreements established and out of the way, and yeah, I'm going to introduce our host, or let her introduce herself, really, authenticity coach, Betty Chan.
Yes, I'm excited to be here with everyone today, and I'll admit I'm a little bit sleepy, but I'm sure I'll wake up as the call goes on. A quick bit about who I am and why I'm here. My name is Betty Chan. I'm an authenticity coach for both life and business. I'm also a speaker and a certified group facilitator. I just love talking about the topic of like how do we be ourselves unapologetically. And I don't like look at me, I'm here, I'm so like, which is something my dear mom loves to do to me. I'm not a fan of that approach of like just look at me, I'm here, but rather authenticity from a gentler place, right? From discovering how we can embrace our authenticity so that we know that we belong wherever, whatever room we step into. We know that we matter and we know that we are always capable depending on whatever is going to come up in front of us. So I usually do this in my coaching, but I'm really excited to be here today with Jerry, just to explore a different layer of it, because oftentimes we don't think about our traditions, how it affects how we show up at work and in relationships as well. And part of just getting to understand how it all ties together is just first notice. So I'm really excited to have you all here with Jerry and I, as we said in the two Asian Americans figuring it out as well. So excited to have you all here with us.
All right, thank you, Betty, for that. Yeah, so much we've gotten to know each other so well from the group coaching, package that we both signed up for, and it's been fun coming alongside you, so we can have this dialogue and really generate awareness as you often so do in your coaching, whether individual or group workshops.
Mm.
And yeah, to kind of dovetail on that, my name is Jerry Fu. I am a Korean leadership coach, just happens to be Asian, really like that. I kind of inherited that, right? That wasn't something I could have changed about myself. And even if I could, we're at a point where we realize it's maybe not in our best interest to run from that, right? There are times when
Mm.
I know in my journey to become a more effective leader and in my own career journey, I had at one point resented really um, what I had been given, and
Mm.
I had enough conflict just trying to fit in and not even fitting in at home, right? Because I did either my Mandarin wasn't good enough or I didn't quite know all the Lunar New Year
Mm.
trivia that I needed to know and appreciate growing up. And at the same time, as a kid, who really gets it from the beginning? But that's a whole. We're gonna unpack that over the next hour. But yeah, just to kind of give a quick tagline for what I
Yes.
do. Yeah, I help leaders, Asians in particular, become more visible, vocal, and valuable, and help navigate this life journey. I am certified in designing your life, and one of many certifications that I have. And it's been great to kind of apply that, number one, to my own life, so I'm not a hypocrite, but also to realize, hey, you know what? There's a big cultural lens to navigate designing your life, both in your career and your personal life. And excited to help my clients, whether it's through individual coaching, group workshops, or keynote presentations where we can share our stories and inspire other people like us to share theirs. So yeah, thank you all again for being here. And again, welcome to everybody who found this discussion, found it interesting enough to register and show up on a middle of the day on a Tuesday. So with that out of the way, Betty, is there a particular question that you want to start off with that you'd like me to set you up for?
I mean, I know you and I planned for this, but we didn't actually get to catch up. Like, how did Lunar New Year actually look like for us? I know that's the start of it. And the way I think about it is just like, how are we staying true to our traditions while staying true to ourselves? And always when it's like a day or two later, I'm like, oh crap, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. Like this year's fortune's not set up for all this good stuff. So yeah, help me feel better and less guilty. What did you end up
That's
doing?
exactly it. Well, I mean, that actually it's a good reminder for why do we even have this hour, right? When we first this idea first came about, like I was excited that you were excited about it, and yeah, what are we even doing here? How was people who are on this call? Feel free to share your thoughts. What did you do for Lunar New Year, right? What was the highlight of your Lunar New Year celebrations? Are they still going on, right? So for me personally, Houston being a multicultural town, right, and a huge Chinatown, things were done, by several different Asian organizations throughout the city. And what's funny is some of my friends who live near Houston Chinatown said, yeah, we didn't go anywhere near it, knowing that every restaurant was going to be crowded, and there wasn't a crowd they wanted to try to compete with for food or any other kind of traffic, really. And so my highlight was that I actually went to a fundraiser banquet for an obscure cancer that a friend had invited me to at a very well established restaurant in Chinatown called Fung's Kitchen. For those of you who have not been, I highly recommend it. I'm not being paid by them to endorse it because the Peking duck egg rolls speak for themselves, right? I should have grabbed a couple more.
Okay.
Yes, their Peking duck is excellent, but then when they have Peking duck egg rolls, you're like, I should have paced myself a little better in this meal. Yeah, there were some things about the night I definitely had to slow down and remind myself, okay, what is going on, right? With all the colors and all the dances, especially with the lion dance. You'd laugh, Betty. I thought they said line dancing, like as in like country line dancing. I thought that's odd. Why would they have line dancing at a Chinese banquet?
Line dancing.
Dancing.
Okay.
And I said, oh god, only in Texas.
There we go.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm based in Houston, just in case anyone was wondering. And so yeah, I remember just thinking to myself, okay, let me slow down. Oh, even better. There was a white girl that was sitting at our table who was also a friend of one of the guest speakers who had invited me to sit in, because one of the people that we had dedicated the evening to was her late daughter who had passed away from this disease, and she was asking all these questions about the culture and the traditions and things, and I was not exactly detailed in my answers when she was asking them, and she's like, but you're Asian, you're supposed to know this. And I just thought to myself, and I called her out on it, actually. I was like, I was in the mood for it. I just said, where's this shame coming from? Like, I already got it from my parents and other Asians that I was not doing this. If you just want the information, like Wiki is there. Like, unless, there are ways to find the information, unless there's this expectation that, oh, well, every Asian is supposed to know Kung Fu and, be able to speak another language and be able to answer everything as a good representative of our culture. And so it was just funny, where on one hand, could I do better? Absolutely. And at the same time, I'm not sure, why you have to be, why I need your seal of approval to say, oh, yes, he is a good Asian. So that was my highlight. And that didn't help that, for those of you who don't know, I had COVID last week, so I couldn't even do a lot. I just said, okay, let me pick one thing I can go to. And then I did that. But yeah, let me back up for a second. Betty, what was your Lunar New Year experience like this year?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it started off the same way every year. You think I do this every year, I would remember what the traditions are. So I feel you when your friend turned around like, "So what are the traditions? What's the proper way?" I always like scramble last minute to like text my mom. I'm like, "Oh, wait, am I supposed to shower the day before or the first day of Lunar New Year? And like, you want me to take the trash out when? And like, wait, I can vacuum, but I can't cut things." Like, there's all these like micro rules built into how we honor and
Mm-hmm.
celebrate Lunar New Year that I'm always in this like tizzy of like, oh, it's like
Mm-hmm.
exam time, right? Like I gotta go study up, I gotta Google, I gotta check with my sources. And it does not help that like when you
Mm-hmm.
do Google what are the traditions, there are about like 100 plus
Yeah.
articles out there, but everyone's got a
Mm-hmm.
slightly
Yeah.
different variation of it, as it does when I ask my mother versus my father versus my grandmother and so forth. So I'm starting to realize this was the first year that like something really clicked for me. I was like, oh, so we're all scrambling to clean because the underlying thing they want us to remember is like you on the first day of Lunar New Year, you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
throw away stuff because with the new year there's an assumption that it brings new fortune for you and your family and your loved ones, and that if you take out the trash or if you wash the
Mm-hmm.
luck off your body, that would then reduce it. First of all, I'm not the biggest believer in
Yeah.
luck and fortune, but at the same time, it's like it's been ingrained in me to not do anything actively to deter it per se. So that's where all this like rule
Mm-hmm.
following came in as well. And I was like, oh, this was actually a really big part of my childhood where like rule following
Yes.
was rewarded, and that like I didn't even think to stop to question why we're doing the things we're doing. And it was only this year at the ripe age of 37 that I'm like, oh, so we clean the day before because the goal is that we don't want to wash away
Mm-hmm.
luck the day of. So if we know we're not going to be able to clean for the next 2 or 3 days or take out trash, then of course we want to clean as much as we can before. But all the encouragement is very stressed on like, you better clean everything, there's no trash. Because the funny thing that happened quite a few times, as it does every year, my partner's like, wait, can we generate more trash like between now? I'm like, we got to generate trash sometime, like we're going to eat, we got to open things, right? So it's not like the trash can has to
Mm-hmm.
stay clean the whole time. So it just it this year something just clicked. I was like, oh, I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
clean everything. Actually, I can actually not clean everything, but just make sure I don't take out trash and I don't clean on the days they tell us not to throw
Mm-hmm.
away our fortune. So it was a little bit of that. But yeah, other than that, I would say the thing that I found really interesting this year, I was in
Okay.
Mexico City right before Lunar New Year, and a dear friend of mine showed me around town, and she also observes Lunar New Year,
Mm-hmm.
and she had a friend coming in the following
Mm-hmm.
week during this time, and she was just looking for a dim sum place to have a meal together, which is a very important part of the tradition, is like the
Mm-hmm.
togetherness of it all. But she informed me that she had a really hard time finding anywhere in Mexico City because all the families who run it has migrated
Oh
back
man.
to China and
Wow.
Hong Kong and Macau
Oh
to
wow.
celebrate with their families, which we don't have that happen as much on the States. And I'm based out in the Northeast. So, like, there's always
Yeah.
going to be someplace open. But I was like, oh, wow, in a country where the cuisine is not
Mm.
as big, um, that those families, they gotta celebrate. They gotta go back home, and you're gonna have to find your
Mhm.
own way to celebrate if they're not there to offer you that dim
Yeah.
sum.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
such a crime, right? Just how he just trying to get some dim sum, right? That's
That's
yeah.
all I want, some food, some egg rolls, Peking duck with
Yeah.
egg rolls.
You know, while I'm traveling, I should be able to have access to, Chinese food wherever I am, regardless of it is. And I mean, incidentally,
Mhm.
what's funny is I remember
Mhm.
being in Vienna, traveling there a couple of years ago, and I find a Chinese restaurant and talk about a multicultural experience. Like the Chinese lady greets me in Austrian German because she can't assume that I know any Mandarin, and obviously it's for the
Oh,
local for the
wow.
local people, right? And so I start. So incidentally, I actually learned German in
Mm.
high school, so I started speaking to her in what broken German that I can order my food in, and then at one point
Yeah.
she, since I don't know Austrian German that well, I at one point I just used Mandarin. I just asked Mandarin in Mandarin, just "可以用中文
Mm.
讲吗?" And then she's like, "Oh yeah, 可以,当然可以." And then it was just it
Okay.
was such a strange moment where I felt like my brain just kind of short circuited for a second. It's
Imploded,
like what
right?
just happened, and then yeah, it's such a
Yeah.
it's a noble cause, right? When you're just going through Mexico, and incidentally, Tom Segura has a great
Mm.
bit where he talks about how the Asians in Mexico also know Spanish and can speak it, and yeah, it
Yes.
definitely throws us all
Yes.
for a loop. I was like, wow, how many more languages do we know?
Mostly, I assume mostly the
Yeah,
Americans.
yeah. Watch those assumptions.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah.
like, wait, that's it's
Yeah.
getting complicated.
Well, actually, Jerry, you bring this up for me, like knowing how different it could look everywhere,
Oh
even
yeah,
like with
yeah,
us in the States, especially as like first
yeah.
generation Asian Americans. Um, like what keeps you
Mm,
celebrating Lunar New
great
Year?
question. Um, yeah, I mean, I admittedly I am tempted to play it down actually. Well, it's not because it was
Oh.
just it was one of those rituals that just got stale over time, right? And one of the stories that
Mm.
I know I shared with you when we were leading up to this, but I'll share it now. Is when I remember in college where I was here at Rice locally, and like all the Asian organizations were ramping up for their Lunar New Year celebrations and
Mhm.
choreographies and programming, and
Mm.
it just felt like it was an interesting burden, right? Because on one hand, it was like it was like these all these different Asian priorities just kind of start to pull at each other, where it's like, well, we have to study, and then at the same time, well, there's this big tradition, what part of it? Yeah,
We have
and
to do
especially when
this.
I grew up in
Yeah.
Wisconsin and Tennessee, where it's not as
Oh.
prevalent, right? Like the Asian organizations there are
Mm.
intentional about
Mhm.
having programming around Lunar New Year, and so they did what they could, and then there was always something around.
Mhm.
Thankfully, by the time I got to Houston, and then, but at the same time, yeah, I was not at a point, in my college career where I could really appreciate. Oh, this is what it's about. Everyone thinks about New Year, but then when Lunar New Year
Mhm.
comes around, and like you said, right, everything is built around how much fortune can we amass for ourselves, right? And
Yes.
on one
Yeah.
hand, it is to honor the hard work that our ancestors did in order to pass along, blessing to the next round of generations that they may never
Mhm.
see, and to say, hey, you know what, we sacrifice, to give you
Mm.
a slightly better life than what we had. Um,
Mhm.
and so I realized recently, to come back to your question, what keeps me celebrating is just the idea that I don't want to forget who I am. Right.
Mhm.
I think if I stop celebrating altogether, then I know I want to take the time to not shame myself into, right. That would defeat the whole purpose of even trying to have this
Yeah.
conversation. But what keeps me
Yeah.
celebrating? Yeah, connecting to my cultural heritage and identity. Really
Mhm.
saying, hey, yeah. Um, there's always some like quiet shame of being like, don't be like the Asian that's just like nominal, right? That doesn't know any language, doesn't know any culture, doesn't know any,
Oh,
the
yes.
whitewash. Because then I mean, not, and it's not to call out any Asians that find themselves like that, because I've met people that they just grew up in a different culture. They had no way, they weren't in an environment
Mhm.
that made it conducive for them to even study their heritage, study their culture, use the language, right?
Mhm.
Because we always default to whatever language is easiest for us to use, whether it's English or Spanish or
Yeah.
something else. You're going to use whatever language comes most convenient for you. But yeah, to answer that question,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just to remember, hey, don't forget this about
Yeah.
who you are, and don't let
Yeah.
that complicate who you become, because yeah, like there's this common
Mm.
thread that will run through your entire life if you are willing to let it, and be intentional with it, right? Because it's easy to
Mhm.
get swept away in the immediate, and so you have to be intentional in making sure that you don't lose sight of just going through, the symbolic nature of this, so we're not just checking off a box, going through the motions. Hey, slow down for a second. But yeah, let me flip the question
Yes.
back to you, Betty.
Yeah.
What keeps you going with all this?
Yeah. And I also
Yeah,
want to
please
open
do.
up to folks who are with us. Like, I'd love to hear different reasons and like different perspectives of like what keeps you celebrating. Like it could be Lunar New Year or just like generally how you think about traditions and cultural practices as well. And I would say, I want to say like I'm trying to think back to like what Lunar New Year felt to me throughout the decades. I think when I was younger, it was just like a thing to do. It was like a fun party to go to. It was great food, like age 10 and below, it was just like
Yeah.
a party that we did and like a bit of like duty to um like my family observed Buddhism a bit more in the early days, not so much nowadays, but like there was a lot more of like you said, like praising to the ancestors, praising to the deities of like just bring
Yes.
us good fortune. And I didn't hear it so much as the way I hear it nowadays, which is very consumerism. Like, oh, we got to get way to get as much fortune. There's like a scarcity to like let me
Yes.
squirrel away as much of that
Mhm.
fortune as I can now, because there's a fear that like it
Mhm.
won't come at another time in the year when but when I think back to like my younger days of celebrating it, it was just much more of like a togetherness. Like
Mm.
we all
Good.
celebrate in this sharing of abundance together. But I think similar to you, I went to a
Mhm.
predominantly white college, which thankfully Babson did have some representation of, Asian American groups from like Japanese, Koreans, South Asians, and Chinese as well. So like we did the fashion show thing, we did the Asian night, food hall festival, etc., which is always really nice to see. But at the same time, it felt very
Mm.
tokenized because everything around
Mhm.
it wasn't it. Right. So it was just a very different experience of like that celebration versus the celebrations I see in like New York Chinatown. And I've never had the pleasure of like seeing Lunar New Year celebrated back in
Oh
like
yeah, not
China,
at
Hong
all.
Kong, and like a place where like it is just much more
Mhm.
the everyday tune. So I believe like what we have access to your point earlier, really shapes our
Yeah.
understanding of it as well. So I think nowadays, my long about way of saying like I think nowadays is just like it's just an invitation to kind of reconsider what about my culture
Mm.
I want to carry forward. I'm not going to be able to
Mhm.
carry
Good.
forward everything, but what about it I want to? Because for me, it's like, yes, I'm an American, so I celebrate the Gregorian calendar of like January 1st, which I guess has some similarities of like, look, all the things we got to do, all the goals
Mhm.
and all the resolutions. And then Lunar New Year comes like all the fortune, all the
Yeah.
luck a month later, and I'm
Oh yeah.
exhausted by now. But I'm
Mhm.
also South Asian. So I'm also from
Mm.
Burmese culture. So we do Thingyan in
Wow.
April and May. And that's like more of like I'm
Yeah.
oversimplifying it because this is the only way I know it. It's like a giant water balloon
I love
festival,
it.
like you spray water at
Yeah.
everyone as well. So it is more for me. I still have like
Mhm.
the kiddie version of
Mhm.
that in my brain. But there's just like, which one of those is the new beginning? Which one of those is really my
Mm.
tradition and my heritage? And it becomes hard to answer. So something I'm just like, each time I celebrate, I'm just inviting myself to notice what's showing up for me, what still feels like a rule that I have to follow versus something I genuinely feel connected to and I want to
Mm.
carry
Yeah,
forward.
and it is.
Yeah.
No one likes to cut things out, right? No one wants to feel like they're leaving something behind,
Mm.
and it
It's
is.
a part of
Yeah.
us. Like, I don't think I
Exactly, and it's
can right
not like
now.
we're just
Yeah.
gonna completely
Yeah.
delete it, but maybe we just shelve it for a little bit. I mean, and again, there's no we're again, like,
Mm-hmm.
as we promised in the beginning, we're not here to solve your problems. But we are here to offer idea yeah,
Nope.
sorry about
Sorry.
that. Yeah, but we are here to offer ideas, right? Say, "Hey, well, here are some things on the table you can maybe experiment with, just to see how it shows up in your life." And
Mm.
I think you make a great point, right? Because when you mentioned, oh yeah, like I see the word chant and I think, oh, she's probably I like what Ali Wong says. She's like, there's like classy Asian and then jungle Asian, like in one of her. Yeah, I know, right?
I got
It's like,
both.
what do you honor? How do you manifest both? And if I mix the two, is that
Yeah.
sacrilegious or is that like
Yeah.
creatively honoring both somehow? And of course, there's plenty of history and
Mm.
complicated history behind how the different Asian cultures interact with each
Hmm.
other. Um, And I think, to your point, right,
Mhm.
I think it's going to look different every year. And not to get ahead of
Mm.
ourselves in this
Yeah.
discussion, but recognizing, hey, you know what? Okay, this year, here's what I'm going to do. Here's the principle I'm trying to honor. And let me share that with a couple of people and see what kind of response I get. And you know what?
Yeah.
Let's not forget to enjoy the, like let's not let the duty crowd
Yeah.
out the very thing that we're trying to generate and grow in terms of joy and celebration. And when we're too busy thinking, oh, did I do enough, right? It's kind of hard to enjoy the celebration when you think, well, did I
Mm.
do enough to honor it, as opposed to saying, here it is, let's
Yeah.
see what happens, let's learn, let's adjust, and you know what, let's enjoy the
Mhm.
process, I think.
Mhm. I love that because I think as and I might be generalizing, so if someone disagrees,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
please let me know in the comments, but I firmly believe that as Asian Americans, we have a hard
Hmm.
time celebrating. And part of that is that there is so much duty and things we have to do, things we have to set up. We have to be a good host. We have to make sure the fruit's in the right place and we got to have the right foods on the table and all that, that we start to forget that the whole point of this
Mm,
is gathering, right? It's like being present, it's being together. Like that celebration part. I think if we have a hard time doing it in the biggest moment of our year, we're going to have a hell of a hard time doing it
yeah.
in the smaller moments
Mm,
throughout the year too. So that's just something to be mindful of, that like the patterns, the reason why I love exploring these like supposedly nuanced topics with you, Jerry, is because what shows up as a pattern here for us is a pattern that
mm,
shows up in our leadership, shows up in our relationships in our life as well. So yeah, I think for this year, it was just the thing I wanted to hold on to was like recreation and like
yeah.
honoring as well. So just making sure that I am I'm like looking to the wisdom of the elders in my family. My mom, who I love you, mom, but you do love to you're really free form with the advice, mom. And sometimes I'm like, no, but like this was my opportunity. But like you are taking the lead. You will tell me what
Mm,
you do traditionally, and I will come to you. And like just the fact that I'm going to
mm,
her with questions is a way to
yeah.
bond, is a way to connect, is a way for us to just and for her to feel like I'm
Yes.
carrying something of hers forward too, right? So she doesn't feel like I'm just that American child that's abandoning everything about about us and our
Yeah, no, I
family.
love that.
So
Where
yeah.
there's always, I think there's some kind of like generational tension that is just recurring every time, and
Oh,
to
yeah.
be able to have that conversation and still say, okay, mom, thank you for your thoughts, and here's what I'm going to do. Well, you should do this and
Mhm.
that. And you just say, it's, thank you for that, mom. This is
Mhm.
what I'm going to do. And it's easier to tell
Mhm.
somebody to do that than to do it yourself in front of your own parents and say, "Yeah, thanks, mom and dad." Right? We
Oh,
we joked
yes.
about that with like the banquet I went to. We just said, if oh well, our aunt's coming and we need to sit him here and there, and I just thought, oh Lord, like that just sounds exhausting. Trying to
Yeah, it's like
exactly,
wedding planning
pretty
every
much,
year.
and to and I'm just gonna put this on the table because I thought it was a funny moment. And do you remember in Iron Man 2 where basically, he has a moment where this toxin's in his body and it's going to kill him, and then he rewatches an old video from his dad, like before he passed, and he said,
Mm.
Tony, everything in this, and he's like gesturing to like this like utopia model, that he has, prototype that he has on the board. Everything I have here, I've
Uh-huh.
given to you, like so that you can have it, and
Mm.
the irony was that if you've, I'm not here to go rabbit hole down the whole Marvel thing, but the moment that hit me when as we were prepping for this was basically he realized that the board that his dad designed contained the clues to the element that he needed that in order to save his life. Like the very element that was from his dad was
Oh.
the very thing that was hiding all along that helped him, be like the Iron Man he needed to be, like he was
Oh.
like, because modern medicine was
Mhm.
containing his toxin but wasn't fully curing him. And I just thought to myself,
Mm.
huh, right, that feels like that's what if there's clues in what
I
our
like that.
ancestors did, or the three generations past that are so easy to forget. that we realized if we took the time to really study
Yes.
that, to say, oh, this is the trajectory, that, oh, that's the
Yeah.
solution, right? The entire time was just, the lack of,
Okay.
I always joke. I always feel like Asian parents feel like they lack awareness in a way, and I say that not as a judgy way. They're just so focused on the fortune, right? And just, oh, we need more fortune and the feng shui and all that all together, right? And it's like, do we get enough fortune so
Yeah.
we can give you more fortune and then you can pass on more fortune?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
slowing down and saying, okay, well, what was all that fortune about, right? And we're trying to
Yeah.
head toward this good life
Yeah.
because they want their future generations to have a better life, and at the same
Mhm.
time we get so caught up in the legalistic aspect of it, and then we beat ourselves up if we didn't check every box, right? We clean before or after, and then we start to split hairs, and then it's like, okay, hang on, how do we slow that down and say, okay, yeah, what are
Yeah.
the elements that we want to draw on, and what new thing do we want to create with them,
Mm.
in ways as cultures change,
Yeah.
even as some things stay the same.
I mean, I just love I don't remember that scene from Iron Man. Now you're gonna make me have to rewatch the movie again. But I love just the concept of like, yeah, we always look forward thinking that's where the answer is gonna be, but sometimes the answer is behind us. And I love that because that shows up a lot in the work of
Good.
authenticity as well. And like, I mean, is that a question before I dive in? Like, what
Well,
are
let's
the
ask that. Let's
elements
let's throw that in there
of
for you. Yeah. So what are the
okay,
elements? Yeah. So
okay.
yeah, you're allowed to ask your own question and then try to answer it. That's a fun coaching angle to take.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's true. That is a big part of coaching. Like, you know the
Exactly.
question you wanna
Yeah.
ask,
I
so we're
do.
just here
It's
to help you
close.
through it. Wow, I need to think about this one because admittedly right now, what's at the forefront of my brain is like, I'm just sifting through the Rolodex of all the rules
Yeah.
that I had to do. And like, what do I wanna carry
Mhm.
forward? I think something I didn't realize about Lunar New Year is that it is a celebration of
Yeah.
spring. Right? It's called the
Yeah.
Spring
Chundao.
Festival,
Yeah. Yeah.
in Chinese. Yeah, yeah, right? And I was like, "Oh, because we all call it Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year in the States." I was like, "Oh, I forgot that it was connected to the celebrating of a
Okay.
season to come
Yeah. I like
and, like, new beginning, new life." So, I think this is something I've been kind of slowly moving towards, but now in this conversation, I'm like, "I wonder if I could do it more intentionally
yeah.
next year for myself." January 1st this year did
Mhm.
not feel like January 1st to me. I was like, I'm still in winter mode. I don't want to start anything. Like, F these
Yeah.
resolutions. They never worked for me anyway. I'm
Yeah.
especially not doing it this year. And I was just like, I felt, and like lately, the days have just been getting a
Mhm.
little longer. There's a little more sunlight out there. And I could feel my body just like waking up a bit more and just staying alert for a little longer. And I think it's just that celebration of like, yes, can we celebrate along when the
Oh,
seasons
nice.
happen? Because I think so much of like the 9 to 5 work. I've never been a 9 to 5 girl. I've always been a night person. And just like, yeah, it's like moving with sunlight. Like something I've done for my business lately is like when the winter times come, I actually take less calls because it's just, I notice I'm a much happier person and a much easier, like I'm much more present too when I am taking calls when there's still sunlight
Mhm.
outside of my room. So just like, how do I move back into alignment
Good.
with the seasons? And just knowing that like this was originally a celebration
Mhm.
of a new season, not just January 1st that somebody slapped on the calendar. I'm sure they had their good reasons, but to me right now, it just felt like someone slapped
Yeah.
it onto the
Yeah.
calendar. So that's probably one thing, one element I really want to like uplift a
Beautiful.
bit more and
Yeah,
carry.
no,
How about
to
you?
to build on that, I remember when I was home in Taiwan visiting relatives, and I remember seeing some Lunar New Year
Mm.
festivity things and seeing the Chinese character for spring upside down. And I remember telling my uncle, great uncle, hey, that's upside down. He goes, well, it's chun dao, like dao guo
Oh yeah,
lai. And
yeah.
then because it's meant to be a pouring out of new things. And I thought, and it's such a, I don't just want
Oh,
this to be a trivia moment, guys, but when you realize just how much is intentional in everything they do, even if it's largely
Mhm.
dictated by superstition or pagan gods, right? But we can appreciate, oh, what's the bigger theme here, right? Real quick before I kind of tie
Mhm.
that knot off, I want to acknowledge Johnny's comment where he talks about how ancestors were limited by their time, and I
Mhm.
think that's a great point. Feel free to elaborate that
Mhm.
if you want, Johnny. Whether if you want to step on stage or if you want to type out a few more details in the chat. But I appreciate the fact that right, like they don't know what they don't know. They just did what they could to do
Yeah.
the best they could to move on and give us what
Mhm.
they think is appropriate as we move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We say, well, we don't have to worry about paying the bills anymore.
Yeah.
Now I'm just bored. How do I do with my life, right? And so, what do we do with all this time and extra money and that isn't being
Mhm.
tied down by golden handcuffs? But again, that's a whole other conversation. Not about
Mhm.
Lunar New Year, not directly anyway. It's like secondary condoms. But I love what you said about seasons, right? Because John
Mhm.
Maxwell talks about seasons. I remember talking about, hey, look, winter is a time to store things up, recharge,
Mhm.
hibernate. Uh, oh, Johnny, good job. It turns out Marvel has the answers the whole time. Howard Specter. I love
Uh,
it. Yeah,
Howard
no,
Stark
it's probably
quote.
from Iron Man 2 as well,
So
because
Johnny.
this old Epcot model, basically, who knew that it had so much richness in it. Thank you, Johnny. But yeah, I forget that you don't harvest until you plant something, right? You have to plant something. If you expect autumn to roll back around and you
Mhm.
want to have something to harvest, then you have to plant things, whether it's
Mhm.
during the winter, spring, you start to water,
Mhm.
summer, you let it grow, and then autumn, right? Much like our businesses, much like organizations, much like any community where you realize, hey, we can't just keep harvesting
Mhm.
if we're not actively planting and growing. Like you have to do the whole process.
Mm.
And I love that in
Yes.
terms of,
Yeah.
like you said, right? We're just saying, okay, what season am I in? How did I get here? What is the most productive or
Mhm.
appropriate thing I need to be doing right now? Or even if not doing, maybe it's
Mhm.
just being. Because sometimes I love actions. I think they speak louder than words, and at the same time, um, just checking things like then it's easy to start checking things off a box, and then we're just
Mhm.
like, now I'm running in circles, chasing a
Yeah.
tail, and it's like, okay, hang on, slow down. Um, who do I need to be right now before I
Yeah.
decide what to do next if I
Mhm.
choose to do anything? Yeah.
Mhm. I think that's a powerful noticing. And we're not encouraging like a
Mhm.
right or wrong way to do it, but I think most of us know what it feels like when we are in action, when it's aligned to what we want in the moment for our life or the season of our life. It feels amazing. It feels like you're in flow. But when we're just going through the motions, like you said, Jerry, just to check off the boxes, it starts to
Mhm.
feel weighty. We start to feel like we're just doing things that don't actually feel authentic to us. But I imagine for the seasons perspective, it's the sowing the seeds is actually something that I wish I knew when I was starting to become a leader too, because especially as an Asian American leader, there's so much of this priming when we're younger to like, go ahead, be the most successful version you can be and be it tomorrow. Like be
Yeah.
it at every given moment, every
Yeah.
waking moment of the day. And it does feel like we're just constantly harvesting this from ourselves and time to resow the seeds for the next season.
Mhm. Yeah. Bear fruit
Mhm.
all the time. Show you're being productive and flourishing
Oh
all the
gosh.
time. Yeah. Yeah. Johnny, we're gonna have to give you some kind of unofficial gold star for chat participation here. So Johnny says sowing seeds season equals very few visible validations. You should do a Canva like graphic for that, Johnny. I think you'd go over pretty well. And you are correct, right? Instant gratification, right? Bang the firecracker, make the firecracker explode, right? We want the lion
Mhm.
dance to, like scare away all the demons and bring in all the good fortune. And like someone saying, hey, I see you planted those seeds, celebrate that, right? It seems
Mm,
like little consolation when everything we're doing is talking about the long game. And
mm,
even as we know that we need to play the long game, right? We still need to play the short game so that we can stay afloat. And yeah, Johnny, good job. Alliteration mood. Hey, the more creative you are with these things, the more they start to show up. If there's anything I've learned, it's just like, man, especially around people, tangent, right? Especially around people who do puns. Oh, once they get started,
They roll.
yeah, literally rolling. And the groans just get louder. But yeah, glad this is a thought exercise for you. And yeah, like I said, repurpose that content, Johnny, before someone else steals it. Because we just might. Betty and I just might turn into a graphic,
We might just take it. No,
we'll cite you. It's cool. Like as long as we don't plagiarize. We're not trying to be sneaky. That's a whole nother conversation. So yeah. Any other thoughts, Betty? This has been fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, as with most of these topics, it's just opening up a channel for us to notice and to start noticing. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to close out this conversation myself. It's giving me some realization of some things I'm looking at, not looking at. So thank you for that.
Yeah. No, I mean, we can land this plane however we want. Thanks for sharing, Johnny. We appreciate your generosity, but no, we will give credit where credit is due. So don't worry. Thanks for being here for sure. Well, we have a bank of questions, right? That we created for ourselves to help keep the burners warm. So yeah, we could actually feel free to the audience. We're going to pose a couple questions and try not to paralyze you with too much. But here are some of the questions that we would love to share with you as we, start to kind of conclude this discussion. Right? We like to ask, what do you think is the main challenge? Right? And we kind of address that. Is it the shame? Is it the obligation? Is it the fight to celebrate and just be? Instead of feeling like we have to do all the things, even though we appreciate the ones who do, right? Like we appreciate it when organizations say, hey, yeah, we want to put on an event. And how can we be present for those? What would make it feel like we're doing enough, right? Independent of what our well-meaning, but, relatives think. I feel like there's always at least like one aunt or uncle that just needs to just hit you with everything that you aren't doing correct, because somehow there's some deep-seated notion that they want you to have the success and live vicariously through your success. So they push you as hard as they can, or they pamper you to an unhealthy extent, right? Trying to get you off the ground. Happy to, there's a LinkedIn user, that's all it identifies the person as, but yeah, happy to, glad that you found this eye-opening, grateful that you took a chance to hear this discussion. So let's say, we've touched on a bunch of these. How do we make sure we don't compromise or water our values down? For those of you who are on the call, feel free to share some of your favorite Lunar New Year memories and ask yourself, and invite. We would be happy to invite you. If these nostalgic Lunar New Year moments meant so much to you, right, in a good way, right? How do you want to manifest them now for yourself or for others, that they might be able to enjoy these things about Lunar New Year the same way you did? I would love to see what they have there. What does it mean to you today? Where does the tension for you show up? And what's one thing you want to hang on to this year? So I know I blissed you with a lot, but we do want to leave you with a couple of reflection questions. And thankfully, Betty has a paid account, so we're going to keep this is all recorded, so we repurpose this later.
This is recorded. You can come back and
I hope so.
it.
Geez, you invested. You got enough skin in the game. But I think, really, I think at this point, happy to hear your takeaway from this conversation, Betty. We do have a little margin here, so people feel free to keep blowing up the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and share something, you can do that too. Again, we're not here to try to shove anyone on stage. We just want to hold this safe space open for you, where people can say, you know what, I never felt like I got a proper New Year's celebration experience, right? Where if they grew up in a town that didn't have a Chinatown, right, or they felt like they just didn't have access to like really good Chinese food, right, or something like that. And we just want to say, well, how can we help you, have a proper experience where it is completely immersive and sensory? Because I understand, right, having a Zoom Lunar New Year celebration where everyone's backgrounds are red and gold, that's great. And at the same time, we know that's not adequate. That's meant to be a supplement, not a substitute for things, except maybe during the pandemic because
Mhm.
safety first, right? But yeah. How can we but yeah, I'll give a minute or two just for
Yeah,
some silence, just
let's
for people to
go.
think and to say, hey, yeah, you know what? Let's take some time to reflect real quick.
Mhm. Yeah, and if folks have like questions or observations, like we'd love to capture them in the comments and like bring them up into the video so everyone can see that as well. But to your question about takeaways, Jerry, I would say I would just to add a few more questions for folks to think about, especially because you might be wondering, like, okay, we're talking about Lunar New Year because it's that time of the year, but what in the world is a career and leadership coach and an authenticity coach? Why are we hosting this as
Yeah,
well?
seriously.
And a lot of it's just like, as I mentioned, right? It's like, wait, how does that connect? But for those who joined a little later, this was something we mentioned early on, like just giving ourselves the space to notice, right? Like
Mhm.
notice where, as Jerry mentioned, the tension shows up. And for me particularly, I love noticing unlearning process as well of just how do I get more authentic and how do I do it in a way that feels gentle and unapologetic rather than, oh, I got to show up a certain way, because it's so easy to like run away from one thing and just run full
Good.
circle and you find yourself back in the same place.
Hmm.
And just how do we open ourselves up to what is there for us to receive? So in a less vague form, it's just noticing. For me, Lunar New Year was a really good opportunity for me to notice, when am I rule following versus when am
Yeah,
I
that's a
honoring,
great term. Yeah,
right?
good term.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like what is feeling like too tight, too ruly, and like how do I reconnect to the values I want out of this moment? And another question that came up for me in this conversation is, how am I allowing myself to celebrate and how am I not allowing myself to
Mhm.
celebrate? And where do these patterns show up everywhere else in my life
Yeah.
outside and around Lunar New Year
Mhm.
as well?
Yeah.
So that comes up for me too.
Oh,
And I
great.
think um,
It's blowing up in the
we might
chat.
have
Yeah.
some thoughts
Yeah.
here,
Yeah. Let's
and I
acknowledge
believe the
those.
LinkedIn user might be Titania
Okay.
T.
All right.
Let's see.
Do
So T
your
says it's
detective
one
work.
of the only times of the year I feel connected to my heritage. Um, for some reason, like when I start cooking a lot of Asian food and craving it as well. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
That makes sense considering we grew up on this. This is what nourished us. This is our sustenance, right? And also the power of smell, the power of taste.
Mhm.
I think so many folks identify when we first explore a new culture, food is a really big gateway, and food has a very like visceral memory in our body as well. So I can totally see that. I can totally see that.
Yeah. And the comment
And
right before
Johnny, we're
too,
going to bring
Johnny.
you up
Yeah.
as well. I think reimagining ceremony is powerful. Ooh. So you want to read that, Jerry?
Yeah, sure. I think reimagining ceremony is powerful but
I think
intimidating,
re-
feels like a minor repulsion. But keeping something fresh is also how we connect to it most deeply.
hmm,
Yeah. Oh, so much richness there, right? Because it is
yeah.
a nice idea, and then we say, well, who's going to sign off on this new ceremony to come up with for myself, right? I can't believe this is coming up now.
Yeah.
Well, it's just I remember there's a not to, yeah all these cultural references. Like I remember a Saved by the Bell episode where they imply that Zach Morris actually has like some Native American heritage like in his lineage, and so they do this ceremony that's completely
Okay.
sacrilegious the first time where he's like drawing eye black on Screech and just completely just makes a mockery of it, and we thought, oh look, on one hand, well, at least he tried. It's like, did he really?
Oh
Right,
no.
and then actually did some homework on it and did a proper ceremony that honored, that showed that he really put some work into it, just to show that he really
Hmm.
appreciated, who he came from, what he came from. And so, yeah, right. I think, Johnny, your thoughts are spot on here. It is a daunting task, right? Because we just want to get it right, right? That perfection, that's the enemy of progress. And at the same
Hmm.
time, right? Yeah, where do you draw that line? Where does the needle fall in terms of creative versus sacrilege versus like completely lost sight of the forest in terms of
Hmm.
I remember one of the Lunar New Year
Yeah.
celebrations at WashU in St. Louis one year. I remember they had a good job, Johnny. We totally got to connect after this. Um, they involved a kung fu fight, a choreographed kung fu like fight, like done to Mortal Kombat soundtrack, right? And like I remember thinking, well, are they junior? How do you process this, right? And on one hand, we appreciate what they're doing, like they're showing off martial art, and at the same time, like the music is not anything like that would have. Again, it's not to criticize, but we are
Mm,
just saying, well, what kind of music should they have used? Maybe that showed, hey, yeah, we paid attention to these kind of things. But again, there is no right answer. There is no
mm,
judgment. It's just we're just putting thoughts to say, what if? Um, yeah, I love what you said, Betty, about
mm,
authenticity as it shows up when it comes to Lunar New Year, things like that. And yeah, same thing with my
mhm,
company, Adapting Leaders. Right, we want people to adapt without compromising. Right, we're trying to make sure, yes,
mhm,
become more visible, become more valuable, become more vocal, and at the same time, yeah, don't lose sight of who you are the entire time. We're not
mhm,
here to cover up anything. We're not here to shame anybody for feeling bad about these things. In fact, we want this to be a space where
yeah,
people say, hey, you know what? I always feel inadequate around this time of year, right? We
mhm,
want people to
mhm,
understand, hey, we don't want to condone, right, the shame and the emotional scarring that can come from, some of our upbringings. At the same time, it's like, okay, well, how do we process them more in a way that's actually helpful to help you become who you were always meant to be? Because right, as we'd like to talk about, I know Morgan Freeman in a deleted scene where Bruce Almighty tells Bruce, he goes, hey, um, some of the most beautiful paintings start off with some of the darkest colors. And right,
mm.
on one hand, yeah, let's. I don't think anyone needs more shame, right? Like that's definitely
No,
not something anyone needs. And so, yeah, like
no,
how do we take this desire? Because right, this micromanaging, right, the tough love, right, all these things that were meant to
mhm,
strive us for our best. Hey, I just want you to have a good life. I want you to like develop good habits. I want you to make sure that you appreciate just how much hard work everyone leading up
mhm,
to you has done so that you can watch Netflix, right? Like again, this shaming, right? Where we say, oh, well, we didn't work this hard just so you could, put your life on cruise control. We wanted you
mm,
to, yeah, celebrate this. And at the same time, just trust that even if people may disagree with your effort, because it will never be good enough, like you said, and our prep, Betty, to say, yes, I can,
mhm,
when I go to bed, I look at myself in the mirror. I can be okay. I
mhm,
think. I think
yeah,
that's what we're all looking for, right? To say, yes, I belong. I am enough, and I am here.
mhm, yeah. I love that. And something else that like I really appreciate in Johnny's comment is like the refresh of it.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of like sometimes our elders need a little reminding
Mm,
of what it is. They were so focused on amassing this luck and fortune to take care of us. I do generally believe that is the source of a lot of their dedication and their commitment. But sometimes when you forget where that source is coming from, you lose sight of it a little. And we start building these rules and these things, and they become armor that like we slap on
there you go.
ourselves to protect ourselves.
Mm,
So it's just sometimes we have to help, not just in our own discovery, in our own questions of asking what these traditions are, we can actually help our elders reconnect to the very core
mm,
of it as well. And like take off that armor. Like, what was this really for? Like,
yes.
tell me about this, mom.
Yes.
Like, why do you really need me to wear red underwear today? Like, what is this
Oh,
about? Right.
yeah.
So, so things like that. And
Yeah.
also, I think the second part is it traditions form by the people who practice it. So
Mhm,
like if we join in that practice and we join in that celebration, then we will start shaping what
mhm.
that tradition looks like as well.
Good.
It's going to look different generations from now. So
Yeah.
just knowing that tradition is not meant to be written as rules in stone, but rather just a way for us to keep reconnecting, keep reinventing, keep celebrating as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's whoa, wow. We covered a lot today, Betty. I love it.
We covered a lot.
Yeah. I
Yeah, and I hope everyone who was able to join or those who watch afterwards that you get something
yeah.
powerful out of it. You don't have to take everything. Just like how we're approaching Lunar New Year, like what is that one thing we want to honor, carry that forward, and that's that's what we're going to take with us.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I know we have 5 more minutes, Jerry. So maybe just some final words and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah. I just want to thank you all for seeing this discussion as worth your time. I know we could. I mean, I'll put out some simple calls to action if just to kind of not check the box, but just to invite you, give you guys some options, right? By all means, please, if you haven't already connect with us on LinkedIn, don't just follow us. Like, that's nice, but
Talk to us.
yeah, please connect with me. I always offer, complimentary 30-minute, whether it's just a coaching session, but really just to share your stories, right? Especially if this conversation resonated
Mhm.
with you, please just reach out and say, hey, because if you don't, I'll probably reach you first. But by all means, just hopefully this is a good space for you to think and process and say, you know what, maybe I was going to stay away this year, right, from Lunar New Year, but you know what,
Mm.
now I've kind of rethought things through, and there's still events going on. Maybe I go check one out, right? Maybe I
Mhm.
reach out to a friend who's maybe kind of in the same boat that I am in terms of circumstances or heritage shaping, culture shaping, where in a globally cross cultural world, things get complicated very quickly, and
Mhm.
how do you kind of not extract, but embellish or play up the colors, of Lunar New Year more visibly, and at least for the next day, week or so, while the season is still here, while things are still ripe,
Yeah.
and as we extend the metaphor a little bit. But yeah, let me not talk too much, Betty. Any last thoughts from you? Any calls to action? Any invitations?
Yeah, I mean, similar to you, I'm more of a conversation person. So if there's still a lingering question that you have, like feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or jump over to my website, heybettychan.com, and just schedule a coffee call. But other than that, like if this resonated with you, if this made you think of a friend who might be processing this themselves too, we'd love it if you could help us share the conversation. So the more the merrier when it comes to de-shaming ourselves around our holidays.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank. So once again, we're gonna give you a little bit of margin, I think, unless Betty, I don't want to overstep
No,
your
time back is always good.
we don't want to overstep and be like, hey, we're done. And Betty's like, wait, hang on, right? Um, we do want to thank you all again on a random Tuesday right before Valentine's Day, right? It's a different shade of red,
Oh
we
yeah.
do, but yeah, last minute ideas. I don't have any because we don't sell that stuff, but there's plenty of other vendors out there that can help you with your flowers and chocolate and mariachi bands if you need something. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, let's give you back a minute or two, and thank you again for being part of this
Yeah, thank you
discussion.
for joining.
Keep in mind we're probably going to be on here at least once a month doing fun discussions like this. So yeah, by all means, keep in touch, and hope to see you at the next one. Have a great day, everybody.
All right.
Thanks, Johnny. Yeah,
Bye,
thank you.
everyone.
Bye.